Hey everyone, I'm Kristen Jensen, and I am really excited to have a wonderful guest with me today, Smith Alley. Cool name, I have to say, super cool name. Thank your parents for that. Uh, and Smith is the founder of the Live Life Bigger, right? Live
Yep.
Life Bigger Foundation, and he also owns a company called Protect Strong. And so I he's not you're not very old. How old are you?
No, I'm 18. So yeah,
18?
I just barely graduated high school 2 months ago.
Awesome. So but you've been doing this for a few years, haven't you?
Yeah, so I started speaking just about 2 years ago, uh, in my sophomore year of high school. And then it started to grow. And I started Protect Strong, my first company, the summer in between sophomore and junior year.
That's awesome. Well, we definitely need more resources out there for parents. So let's just go back and tell me a little bit about your story so that our listeners and our viewers and readers can just get a little bit of your background. Many of them may already be familiar with you, but what age were you exposed to pornography? How did you access it? How did you hide it from your parents? Just give us a little background about that, and yeah, give us your story.
Yeah, I always say that my story starts and I talk about it using paper cuts. And so in the first day of first grade, I walked into class, sat down, and when it was my turn to stand up and introduce myself, I had a stutter, and my mom would say that it was cute, but I beg to differ. And so I said, "Ha ha, ha, my name's Smith." And I was just so angry and flustered, disappointed in myself. And I remember a girl from the red table, she turned around and she asked me, "Why can't you talk right?" And so that's kind of where my emotional pain is. And I think that anyone who struggled with pornography or substance abuse in general can find their point and their core of pain. And so that's a really important part of my story. When I was 9 years old, I clicked on a link that wasn't what it appeared to be. I was just on a little tablet that I'd gotten for Christmas, and I saw soft pornography for the first time. And my parents had the conversations about what to do when we saw pornography, and I remembered them telling me to turn it off and tell an adult. And so I turned it off and I set this tablet down and I thought about that second part, to tell an adult. And immediately in my mind, I thought back to that kid in first grade who didn't feel like he was good enough. I didn't feel like I was good enough to have friends who cared about me or parents who were proud of me. And so I was scared that even though it wasn't my fault, even though I hadn't gone seeking out for this, that my parents would be disappointed or ashamed of me. And so that point where I had this immense pressure to be the perfect son. I'm the only boy that my dad has. I always felt like I had to live up to that and I had to be a perfect one. That fear and that feeling of not feeling good enough, that led me to the inability to feel like I could disclose what I'd seen, because I'd been taught that it was bad. Um, and so that was just a first exposure. Nothing really came of it until about a year later, when I started to use pornography regularly as a small fix to everything that I was feeling and dealing with. And so it came back into my life. I got social media at the same time, which increased my use of pornography. And it was at that point where kind of the floodgates opened and I had, ultimate access to basically anything that I wanted. And if I didn't have access, if my parents had, done the restrictions or the filters, me growing up in the digital era, I knew how to get around them. And so um, I've always been very good at that. And that's what led me down my path of pornography consumption and mental health. Um, and it that journey came to an end in the 8th grade when I made a plan to take my life because I didn't think that I was redeemable. And so it was at that point when my life started to turn around, and um I got on a different journey. I always say, one of my favorite quotes says that we all have two lives, and the second starts when we realize that we only have one. And so I always say that, like, that's when my second life started. That's when I realized that I only had one life and that I was going to turn it around.
That's wonderful. I mean, we're glad you did, because too many kids don't, and they, there's so many sad outcomes. Um, so, first of all, how did you hide it from your parents? Was it pretty easy? And then what was it that turned you around?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very easy. It was very nerve-wracking, but I was always so careful about my search history, the tracks that I was leaving, where I had been, um, like how much time in a single time I was spending watching porn because I didn't want my parents to wonder where I was and come searching for me. I was very like mentally aware about that, and it was very easy to hide my tracks. Never in my life until everything came to this big accumulation of scenarios. Never did my parents like find anything. You hear a lot of parents who are like, oh, I found that he was looking at this, and maybe it's just like a girl in a bikini. But I didn't really ask it. Like, that wasn't my parents. They hadn't seen anything. I was very good at hiding my tracks. I was very good at like covering my digital footprint. I was very good at using like different Wi-Fi routers. And so I was always very, very good at that. And then, like I said, I got to this point where I reached a demise with my mental health. And I also I got in trouble with the law. And I remember that the police came, um, and they had called my parents. And so that right there was kind of like a kick in the butt. And I remember just like not understanding and not really comprehending where my life was going to be able to go. And I was scared, like, because up until that point, I had been able to kind of live this double-sided life, right? And I'd done it very well. I was, at sometimes severely depressed, thinking about suicide, dealing with pornography, watching pornography. And on the other side, I was the kid at school that like said hi to everyone in the halls and was a student body officer and was very good at sports. And, like all other parents would always compliment my parents about just the character that I was. And so for a long time, I was able to live this double-sided life. And it was at that point that I couldn't anymore, right? And I realized that. And I wanted to get back onto that path of the character that I was, and the smiley kid that I'd been growing up. But I didn't know if that was available to me. I didn't know if it was available to me to come and be redeemed. Um, I always talk about this quote that says, "How far can you go down the wrong path before you can't get back onto the right one?" And so at this pivotal moment in my life, I was just laying in my bed one night, wondering where my life was going to go. It was the same day that the cops had contacted my parents. Um, and my mom came down to my room and she grabbed my face and she said, "Smith, I will fight for you, but you have to fight for yourself first." And so it was at that moment where I just decided, like, she obviously hasn't given up on me when I thought that she would. Um, my family, my dad, my siblings, they haven't given up on me when I thought that they would. I thought that I'd gone too far, and they showed me that I hadn't. And so it was there that I was like, all right, let's do this. And I started to fight. I started to turn my life around.
Well, isn't that interesting? A couple of things. First of all, I've talked to other people that have done the same thing, live this double life. You know, on the one hand, they just were this model citizen, this person that, you know, turned away from anything, you know, the least bit pornographic. They made a big deal about that kind of a, you know, where they wanted people to think of them in a certain way, right? So, and then, but they really were, you know, looking at pornography. So you're not the only one, that's for sure, that has done that. Um, and but I guess now maybe we could kind of look at, well, one thing that I noticed when you said is that you thought your parents would have given up on you, but they hadn't. They wouldn't. They wanted to fight for you and be there for you. And I just wish there was some way parents like could know how important that is, but like how can we teach kids that we are there for them and that we will love them and help them despite the mistakes? That just seems to be a really important message to, you know, to get across to kids, because how is it that you thought that um, when it wasn't really true?
Yeah, I think this is a super big thing. I always say that there's two parts to creating a safe and a strong household. And the first part is creating healthy tech habits slash creating a safe proofed tech house, right? So setting up the actual hardware, software, the actual things that you put into place to keep your family safe. The second part of that is to open up honest communication, to open up discussions. And a big part of this is that parents don't realize that they aren't modeling the behavior that they want to to act on, right? um Kid comes home from school, got a bad grade on a math test, right? Gets a C plus, C minus, D plus. And when the parents
Been there,
find out,
done that.
yeah, when the parents find out, they yell at them, right? They ground them. They're not allowed to hang out with friends. All they're gonna do is do math. And that's a very little mistake, right? In the grand scheme of things, how much does that math class really matter? And so as a kid, we tend to take that example and say, okay, this is a little thing. If my parents got mad at me for this little thing, that's going to extrapolate over a big thing.
Yeah.
And so if
How
we,
much worse it'll be when they
yeah,
find out that I've been looking at pornography or whatever else. Yeah.
exactly. And so
Yeah.
we have to use the same behavior for everything, for every single mistake. We have to use the same thing, which is why we do the no trouble bubble. And this is something that can be used for anything. The no trouble bubble is great for multiple reasons. So the first one is that it gives parents time to react, time to think, and a script. And so a kid comes to their mom, says, "Hey mom, hey dad, can we talk in the no trouble bubble?" And they say, "Yeah." So the first thing is they're giving you a warning that they're about to tell you about one of their mistakes. You might not know how big or small it is. So you have about 45 seconds until you get to that safe space, the no trouble bubble, that you can breathe, collect yourself, remember your script. Now, when you get there, no matter what they tell you, it could be something small like a failed math test. It could be something bigger like they've been viewing pornography, or they're struggling with depression, thinking about suicide. Um, that's when you have your script. And these are the only things that you can say or do in the no trouble bubble. And so you tell them that you love them, you give them an 8-second hug, and then you ask them how you can best support them in becoming the best version of themselves. And so after those three things, the conversation's over. You might continue to hug them, just listen to them, but that's it. Because how many times as a parent does the situation go like this? They tell you something and immediately you react. You either give a consequence or you say something that you wish you wouldn't have. And then maybe the next day you're thinking back to how that happened and you go, I really wish I would have said that differently. Or maybe, you get in bed that night with a spouse and you tell them about what happened and how you reacted. And they're like, did you really say that? And they're like, you're crazy. Or maybe you get on the internet and do some research and you find out that the way that you reacted or the consequence that you gave is the thing that's not going to help them on their path to recovery. And so with this, you have your script, you say that, and then the next day is when you can talk about consequences, when you can talk about whatever reactionary thing is happening. And so that gives you the opportunity to, first of all, like think about
Yeah.
it, relax, just sleep for heaven's sake. It gives you the opportunity to talk to a spouse or a friend about what happened. It gives you the opportunity to go online and research the best ways to fix whatever just happened in your household. And
Yep.
so
Is
that's a
there a
big,
do is there a do-over bubble?
yeah, there should be, right?
There should be a do-over bubble. You can find some cute way to say that, because the no trouble bubble is like very memorable. So we're going to all
Yeah.
remember the no trouble bubble. We have a resource at Defend Young Minds, which is the SMART plan. And the first one is stay calm. And I always tell parents, you don't even have to engage when you find something out, or especially when you find out that your child has seen pornography or someone has shown them pornography. There's no reason that you have to react right then and there, because this problem either has been going on for a while. You got to give yourself at least 24 hours or 72 hours to do just exactly what you said. Think about it. Talk to a friend, talk to a spouse. And the next part of our SMART plan is make a plan. And here are some questions and here are some things. But again, I love the fact that your initial reaction is one of love and acceptance. And this doesn't change our relationship, you know, and I'm not seeing you as the enemy. I'm seeing porn or whatever else it is as the enemy,
And
not you.
yeah, and that's the benefit that comes from being the kid, right? Is that initial reaction is love. And I've seen over and over in my life when I'm reacted to from a mistake first by love, it's going to be 100 times easier to take that mistake and to fix it and even turn it into a success. Whereas when I make a mistake, I'm already down on myself. I'm already mad at myself. I don't need anyone else to be mad at myself too. And I always share like a perfect example of this. That's just something small. So we talked about that math grade. That was me this year. And so my first semester of senior year, I was taking a college math class, 1010, and I did okay during the course. And then on my final, I just didn't study at all. I was like so busy with work. And so I got a 58.625% was my score. And I was just so scared to tell my mom because I was barely passing the course at with this new test. And so I go home and I'm like, I've got to tell her now before she gets an email about it. And so I said, Mom, can we go talk in the no trouble bubble? She's like, yeah, of course. So we head up there and I tell her, I got a 58% on my math final. And you could see her like start to get mad. And then she like just breathe, like all the way in, relax. And she was like, I love you. She gave me a hug and she said, how can I support you in becoming the best version of yourself? And it was just such a testament to how amazing this whole strategy is, because it really does help kids to feel the initial love, because I was already down on myself. I was already mad that I got that score. she didn't need to be. And so when she reacted with love, that really helped the whole situation.
Yeah. Smith, when I was in college, I had a part-time job. And for a variety of reasons, some of which were not my fault, I got fired. And I was just crushed. I mean, I'm a responsible person. This had never happened to me before. And I called my mom because this was going to impact me financially. I was needing that paycheck. And I called her and I told her, and she said, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I remember when I got fired." So she had gotten fired from like a job when she was in high school for whatever reason. And I never knew that, but it was just so like, oh, good. She's not mad at me. She's empathetic, because you're right. I was already just horrified,
Yeah,
Turned out to be a good thing. I went, retrained, got a much better job actually afterwards. But yes, so don't, yes. And I love how you said, the little things matter. How you respond with the little things um, will set you up for your child to be more open with you for the bigger things. So you're building this foundation from a young age. So that's brilliant. That is brilliant. Well, let me just go back and ask. So, um, you said that your parents had told you about, porn is bad and turn away from it, come and tell an adult. So they had done some kind of preparation. Um, and I understand, like, why you might not have like turned to them, because you felt this shame. And I hear that a lot. I've heard that a lot. So what would have helped you? What could your parents uh, or it, how could, is there anything that you can think of that would have helped you to resist porn at age 10? And let me just clarify, you got on social media at age 10.
yeah,
Okay. So I personally would warn parents to not let 10-year-olds get on social media.
definitely.
That's a lot to put on a kid. Too much access to the world. The world has too much access to your kid.
Definitely. And again, I think that it also goes back to the no trouble bubble of reacting to the little things, because my parents didn't react to the little things well. And so I think that's a big thing. They could have reacted better if we had had the no trouble bubble before. I think that I would have been more open to talking about the big things. And then especially the social media aspect. I mean, at first I just had Instagram on my mom's phone. That's what I got first. But I had told my parents that my mom had Pinterest, my sisters had Pinterest. It was just a way to look at like yummy food boards, right? But Pinterest is one of, or at the time it was the biggest social media platform where people consume pornography. And so
And you wouldn't
they
think
didn't
that.
they didn't think that, right? Because
No.
they just go on and see cute clothes and cute home designs and
Yeah.
food. And so like that was a big thing that people don't really think of Pinterest as social media, but it is, and it's a huge access to pornography. And so like even things that you don't think of as like the main social media, which is people think about Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and Snapchat are the big ones, but we don't think about these other apps that we use that are still untethered access to all of these things. And so I think that was something else, is they just weren't aware of what was on there. They weren't aware of what that meant. Um, and so I think that was a big downfall too, is just like parents have to be aware of what stuff is on certain apps, so that they know whether or not it's safe for their kid at any age.
Right. So what advice can you give parents for prevention? Let's talk about the problems. Let's really, and you did tell us some solutions, which is awesome. So I want to talk about what can parents do for prevention? How early should they start? And then secondly, I want to talk about the emotional harm that you feel pornography can do to a child, a person? And how can you convince kids that they will be happier, healthier, have a much better sense of well-being if they keep pornography out of their lives? So let's start with the prevention. Like, what can parents do? What's your best advice for when we say prevention? We're not saying that your kid will never see porn. What we're saying is your kid will know and do um, behave in the way that porn will not harm them
Yeah.
significantly and not become a part of their life.
Yeah. So I think that, again, practicing those conversations with the no trouble bubble, that's a great prevention. Uh, Even just about the little things before. So that's a big one. Again, the second part, which I think is the most like proactive prevention step, is creating a tech safe and healthy home with media habits and family tech contracts, and setting up your software and your hardware, but also trying to limit screen time at a young age. I think that I always put in tech contracts and media goals that um, screen time and technology is not used for entertainment. It's used for utility. We use it as a tool, not to just entertain ourselves when we're bored. And so I think those are all great prevention tips. And then, I mean, we just continue to see the age of exposure going younger and younger. And so we actually list Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior as a great resource on our website. And we suggest
Thank
that
you.
parents start talking about that anywhere from 4 to 6, so that they're ready when, the average age of exposure 7, so that they're ready for that time and they even just know the concepts. And by then, you should have had the no trouble bubble set up for years so that they feel safe having conversations about anything. Oh, I stole my sister's toys. Oh, well, I love you. Here's a hug. How can I support you? And so I think those things all have to work in harmony. But I mean, you really can't start young enough with these conversations anymore. There's no like threshold of when you should start having these conversations, because they're being had online, they're being had at school, they're being had
Mhm.
everywhere that you can think. Family
Yep.
outings with older
Yep.
cousins, and
Yep.
so you really can't start young enough. But we always say like 4 to 6, anywhere in there that you feel like it's right for your child. We start reading Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior, and then move on and continue. And that's the big thing, is continue to have the conversations.
Absolutely. So, what would you say? So, let's go back. Let's talk a little bit about emotional strength and emotional resilience, and how you were talking about how you used pornography to deal with some of the inner pain that you were feeling because of your stuttering, and because you got teased. And so lots of kids have lots of issues, different issues. So how did porn harm you as far as your mental health? And how can you convince a kid that they're just going to be happier without porn?
Yeah, I think, as I've worked with a lot of young men and young women about this, I don't think that I think that, I'll rephrase that. I think that most kids know that porn continues to make them unhappy, but they don't know any other way to deal with the emotional baggage that they're carrying. And so they see it as kind of like it's a medication, right? And if they get off the medication, they die, but the medication is addicting them, and it's making their mental health worse. And so we've seen that with a lot of things, but I really don't think that there's a large group of especially young kids that feel happier with pornography. I think they understand that it feels empty. And that's the hardest part, is
Yeah.
you don't want to step away, because you don't, all those feelings that you've worked so hard not to deal with, you'll have to deal with them. um and then it goes back to that other part. You have to understand and you have to accept that everything that your parents taught you not to do, you've been doing. And
Mhm.
that's hard to accept. especially as, you know, teenagers, we tend to have a very high ego that isn't backed with a lot of confidence, right? So we want to be something that we're not. And so it's really hard to admit those things. It's really hard to um, confess. And so I think that the best thing to do is to first of all find a community, and that can be with just one person. So telling one person, I remember DMing Fight the New Drug on Instagram and telling them that I was struggling, and they messaged me back. And so I think that can be a big thing for kids. But for me, the emotional damage was just tremendous. I mean, obviously it led me to the brink of death.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that pain of just knowing that because of what you're doing, you feel insufficient and you feel like a bad person, but not knowing whether or not you can deal with the emotional baggage that you're trying to fix.
Right.
I mean, it's like you're stuck with a choice of just two super hard roads.
Right.
And then you pile on the fact that if you confess and if you deal with those feelings that you've been feeling, then you're going to pile on parent disappointment, being shunned or
Mm-hmm.
whatever by your family. And so, and even though a lot of times those things aren't realistic, right? You don't come out about this and tell your parents, and they oftentimes don't shun you. It's still a expectation that you have in your head because of, again, the little things that they get mad at you for.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I think in that scenario, it's a choice between two really hard paths. And so my advice is just choose the harder road, because that's what's worth it.
Yeah.
And continuing in whatever pit of misery you're in, it's just going to lead you down to a place that you can't get back from.
Yeah. Well, I think that this emotional resilience piece, when we put out a poll to our audience at Defend Young Minds, we have received time and time again, parents are very interested in how to raise emotionally resilient children. And I'm really glad to see that. When I speak, I have a presentation called the four pillars of prevention. And it includes talking to your kids about sex earlier and in kind of healthier ways. It includes emotional resilience, so kids know how to deal with their negative emotions, and they have options, like you say, instead of going to porn or going to substances. And then, of course, that tech accountability and the brain and body safety, which is so important. So it's not just one thing. There's no silver bullet. It's got to be a comprehensive parenting approach, because it's a comprehensive kind of problem. There's a lot of problems that manifest itself when a child gets involved in pornography. Well, you've given us a lot of wonderful things to think about. So tell everyone where they can find you. I know you're a busy guy, but online, and where they can find you. Point us to the right direction.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at live.life.bigger, or Facebook, the Live Life Bigger Foundation. And then our website is www.livelifebigger.org.
All right. So check out Smith Alley. He's got, I'm sure, lots more to share. And thank you so much for your time coming on with us. I know the parents, again, the no trouble bubble, that's awesome, because when a kid can get up the courage to ask to be in the no trouble bubble, that's when they need encouragement. And when you think of the word encourage, it's really encourage. It's to give courage, and kids need courage. That's for sure. And they need encouragement. So thank you so much. And hopefully we'll get you back again, and we will definitely be, following all that you're doing, all the great things that you're doing. Thank you so much, Smith.
Thank you for having me.